Public hearings in the advisory proceedings on the legal consequences arising from the policies and practices of Israel and the occupied Palestinian Territory, including East Jerusalem, will commence on Monday at the International Court of Justice. This is a separate case from the one brought by South Africa against Israel, questioning its compliance with its obligations under the Genocide Convention in relation to its current military offensive in Gaza. The United Nations General Assembly voted in December of 2022 to request an advisory opinion from the World Court. So for more, let's bring Palestinian Solidarity Movement Coordinator Mametlwe Sebei to weigh in on this. Mametlwe, good afternoon. Thanks for your time on the SABC at this hour.
Good afternoon to you and your viewers.
Let's get your view on these public hearings to be held from tomorrow by the ICJ, perhaps also how the two cases differ.
Look, I think the case that is being brought is focused particularly on the conduct of the settlers, mainly in the West Bank. These are non-state actors, and in this case, these are people that have been, or rather, these are settlers that have for far too long been allowed to settle on Palestinian territories against countless resolutions of United Nations in flagrant violation of the international law. And especially in a context where it is clear that Israeli state is complicit, both in abetting, in funding, but actually also in encouraging and deliberately settling these Jewish settlers on Palestinian lands against the international law. The fourth convention, the fourth Geneva Convention, it is very clear that an occupying power is not allowed to transfer any of their civilian population on any of the territory that it occupies. But also there is regulations, Hague regulations that prohibit, confiscation of the property of the, occupied people. And it is very clear that in respect, at least, of these two international provisions or international law legal provisions, Israel is, of course, in violation of the international law, both in respect of settling civilian population on the occupied Palestinian territories, but also on confiscating as well as evicting and displacing Palestinian people from their land.
Mametlwe, we've seen some of the deadly practices of Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory. And so at this point, how important will this evidence be for the ICJ in bringing justice to those that have suffered in the conflict between both sides over the years? How does it also further add political pressure over Israel's ongoing operation in Gaza from your vantage point?
Yes, two things are very important to highlight. One is that we, are having, even by the Zionist standards of settler colonialism in Palestine, we are having, the most extreme right-wing government in the whole history of Israel. This is a government of settler parties, the most extreme or ultra, right-wing element within, Israeli society and political establishment. Today, these are people who made the government, people like Ben Gvir and all of that. These are people that obviously they're encouraging, they're inciting, and in recent times we have seen they held a conference where basically they are planning a resettlement of the entire of Gaza after the population of forcing all of its population either in Egypt or through the location to Congo as they've been contemplating, or through the mass murder that we have seen in a case that is also before the ICJ. But also, I think it's important to say that, the Israelis, the Palestinian people have also, and quite correctly so, not that they ever really had serious confidence, but if where in the past there was some form of, way that Palestinians could refer cases in Israeli courts and within constraints get some form of justice according to the lawyers. What has become abundantly clear is that that space has also been closed, and that is the reason that in recent time we've seen Palestinians who have been displaced, Palestinians that have been murdered and massacred by the settlers in West Bank. About 60% of them have not even bothered to lodge a complaint either with the IDF or with the Israeli courts, which I think is indicative of the worsening situation on the ground insofar as settler violence, but also the impunity with which they act because of course, the encouragement by the government that today is made up of settler parties, but also the fact that Israeli justice is really no avenue for ventilation of the dispute in this respect.
On the back of that, so obviously now the two questions before the court. The first one, the court should examine the legal consequences of what the UN has called an ongoing violation by Israel of the right of Palestinian people to self-determination. And then the second question, the ICJ is also going to be advising on how Israel's actors affect Israel's the legal state of occupation and the consequences for the UN and other countries as well. And so we're looking at the precedents that this is also going to set, what comes to the fore, and also we're looking at the option of that two-state solution. Is it back on the cards? Are we edging any closer to that?
Well, let's be clear insofar as the two-state solutions. I mean, the imperialist powers like United States, UK, have only placed this issue, as they've done before, as a rhetorical concession to, the vast movement and mass mobilization that we have seen across the world, including in the main centers of these powers, in London and, of course, in Washington, D.C. I mean, just in London, in the past few days, we have seen 250,000 people demonstrating on the street of London. That is in addition to over 1 million that demonstrated late last year. And that demonstrates, again, that, of course, the vast majority of humanity, including in UK, including in Britain, including in Germany, and all the imperialist, Western imperialist forces that are abetting, that are equipping, that are arming, that are inciting Israeli genocide against the people of Palestine, that the vast majority of people in these countries are actually with us. They are opposed to the genocide going on there. But more than that, I think the fact that the matter is on the agenda today of two-state solution is because of the mobilization that is going on. And I also think that the same can be said about the cases, including here in South Africa. South African government did not take the decision that they've taken because just of a moment of wisdom coming out of the blue sky. It is because of the mobilizations, countless demonstrations that we have had across the country. And I think it is those demonstrations here in South Africa and across the planet that are going to keep the question of Palestine alive, but are also are the only thing that are going to ensure the justice for Palestinians. We should have absolutely no faith and confidence in the processes of ICJ and all these institutions of UN that in the final analysis reflect the interest of the Western imperialism that is a dominant world imperialism today. In the final analysis, it is only the organization, the unity, the struggle, and the actions of ordinary people in solidarity, but also the resistance of the Palestinians on the ground that is going to win them the freedom, that is going to dismantle the Zionist apparatus that is occupying West Bank, that is laying siege to Gaza, and currently carrying the worst genocide in recent moment.
And so on the back of that, with these advisory proceedings, just looking at how legally binding they are, they're not, but there's obviously a moral issue that also comes to the fore. What is its efficacy at this point? Just also looking at Israel's response and how, the respect for international rule of law comes to the fore as well. What are you observing on that front as we speak and conclude as well?
Look, the reality is that Israel has been in flagrant disregard of the international law, of the resolutions of the United Nations, but also on number of court rulings, including of the ICJ itself, and not for the past few months since October 7, but actually for decades. The accounted resolutions as well as declarations on the situation and the question of Palestine, none of that have been respected. And that is because the Israeli regime acts with a complete and absolute impunity. That is only made possible, of course, by the United States and by the Britain, but of course the Western imperialism in general. United States has, repeatedly vetoed every resolution to hold, Israeli regime accountable. Even as they are talking about two-state solution, the Israeli regime made it very clear that that is off the table. They have done nothing about that. If anything, they are busy attacking people that are supporting, the Palestinians want an end to genocide. That is the Houthis in Yemen, at the same time as they are equipping and, of course, arming and funding the regime that supposedly they're in disagreement on. Now, it's to say that, you are basically that the action speaks louder than words, right? Show me where your money is, and I'll tell you where your support is. You can't tell me that the United States is behind the cause of free Palestine when they are arming and, of course, equipping the government that is making that impossible.